Welcome to Sex Talks with Diana, a space where, from sex work to Tantra, we tap into raw experiences to uncover how they intersect with sex and sexuality. Because knowledge not only lives in books, we listen to people in their stories. Let's dive in. In today's episode, we will be talking with Gustavo Monje. Gustavo is a meditation teacher, emotional fitness coach, and professor of English and literature at Northern Virginia Community College. He is the host of the YouTube channel Tantra Thoughts that has been up and running for about 6 years now, providing people with tantric wisdom and meditation techniques. We've decided to bring him in to talk today about relationships, spirituality, sexuality, and also emotional fitness. Because here at My Sex Bio, we aim to offer you a holistic view of sex and sexuality. And hey, where mind and spirit are actually affects the way we experience our sex life. So welcome, Gustavo. Thank you for being here with us. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm great, Diana. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. So I want to give you a space to just, maybe describe yourself to the audience. Just say anything you want to say. Who are you?
Who am I? I think you covered it. You mentioned all the things I do. And who am I? I'm your brother. That's it.
Cool. So I guess we could start just because Tantra is such a, like a wide topic and there are so many paths and interpretations. I think the first question we can start with is, what is Tantra to you? Or what's the way you see Tantra and the way you're working with it?
Tantra is a spiritual tradition that goes back thousands and thousands of years. It's debatable, its origins. A lot of academics trace Tantra back just around 2,000 years. But Tantra was really born at a time where there was no written language, there was no historical records being kept, and it was largely an oral tradition, much like indigenous traditions around the world that also go back thousands of years. So it's an ancient spiritual science that comes from the indigenous people of India. And the goal of Tantra is to become one with the supreme consciousness, become one with Brahma. And that is accomplished through meditation, that is accomplished through a sense of devotion and having a relationship with this supreme consciousness. It's largely based on meditation and also taking this desire for perfection, for enlightenment, and not just keeping it within yourself, but also bringing that out into the world. So much like indigenous traditions have a scope for, seeing the plants as one and the minerals as one and the animals as your siblings. In the same way, Tantra externalizes this spiritual edification and externalizes it so that you try to make the world a better place. You try to see everything as one, since in the end, the goal of Tantra is to be one with not just Brahma, but Brahma in all of its expressions and in all of its forms.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And I think very helpful for us in today's world. One question that I think we can cover, just in case you think it's necessary, is what are the core concepts? Maybe you just mentioned Brahma, for example. Maybe for somebody who has never heard of these things, what are the key concepts to keep in mind that maybe you might be mentioning in the interview later?
Brahma? What is Brahma? Brahma is the Sanskrit word for supreme consciousness. And Brahma is made up of two principles, consciousness and energy, or in Sanskrit, Purusha and Prakriti. So that means that Brahma is observing everything in the universe, and Brahma is doing everything in the universe. Much like us, we have the capacity to do things, but we're always observing ourselves doing things. So we're a reflection of Brahma. So we also are a composite of consciousness and energy at any given moment. Um, that's the short answer of what Brahma is.
And are there any other concepts aside from Brahma that people should keep in mind? Maybe very, very important.
With Tantra?
Yep.
Well, meditation. So it's based on mantra meditation. And the meditation, the mantra itself is it's like a password that you have. Every time you repeat it, you ideate on it. Yes, you don't repeat it like a parrot. You have to think about what it means every time you say it. You have to visualize what it means every time you say it. And usually your mantra means something like, I am consciousness, or all is consciousness, or I am that supreme consciousness. And the Sanskrit word that is your mantra, you keep secret. It's passed down from a teacher to a student, and that should be kept private just for you. So I would say those are important points. And then, of course, there's a whole philosophy in Tantra that has to do with chakras, has to do with layers of the mind, chambers of the mind, has to do with nadis and breathing techniques and concentration techniques, and also a moral code. The moral code is yama and niyama, which is the code of ethics in yoga. So it's very vast, very, very vast. All of the many different topics that you can find under Tantra.
Thank you. And I had never heard of this code of ethics. Maybe can you talk a little bit about it? Or
it's very important. It's highly important because a lot of times this is what's missing in the yoga studios is the 10 moral principles of yama and niyama. It's also in Patanjali's 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga. So, and Patanjali is like such a huge authority in the world of yoga. I don't think there's a yoga teacher training that can go without talking about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and his 8 limbs of yoga. And so the first 2 are yama and niyama, and these are 10 moral codes. Like just as an example, the first one in yama is ahimsa. It means not to hurt anybody with words, thoughts, or actions. The second one is satya. It means not to always use your words for good in the name of benevolence. So, and number 3, asteya, not stealing. So just those 3. I mean, if you just practice those 3, and if everybody in the world practiced those 3, I mean, think of what a totally different world we would live in if you're consciously trying not to hurt people, trying to always use your words positively, and you don't take what doesn't belong to you, you know? So just those 3 in themselves create such a powerful transformation. But if the yoga studios aren't teaching these, then the yogis that learn yoga, you know, they could make mistakes. And we've seen, you know, so many gurus that act immorally, so many people that do yoga and meditation, but yet they don't have this moral base. They can still cause a lot of damage to others and themselves. So part of the reason why these moral, ethical principles should be firmly in place in oneself is because when you meditate, you actually gain a lot of power just in the basics. You know, you get a lot of concentration, a lot of intuitive development and emotional development, but all of that could be used for something bad, you know? And when it gets used for something bad, for especially when it hurts other people, then, you know, the practice just crumbles. So it's important that you have a moral base so that when you meditate and you develop these benefits, then you'll use them for good.
That is very nice, very important. Thank you. And I think something that you started to talk about there are a little bit, it's closer to the misconceptions that people can have about Tantra. So maybe if you could mention which are maybe the most common ones or the most important misconceptions that you think people tend to have about Tantra.
Yeah. The biggest one is sex. So I think, somewhere along the way, in the 1900s, and especially in the United States, there were some people that began teaching sacred sex rituals. And some of these people had some background in Tantra, and this association began. And the misconception also goes back thousands of years. And I have some videos on that on my YouTube channel. But sex is largely associated with Tantra. And I would say that is that's the biggest misconception. Tantra is it's a spiritual thing. It's about meditation. There are that I know of no ancient sexual techniques that today people teach and they bill under Tantra. So the reason I started talking about the new development is because there is something called Neo Tantra, and Neo Tantra is about sex, and I think it's important to distinguish the two. So I think it's fair that when you are teaching something about tantric sex, that you call it just Neo Tantra, and when you're mentioning something like Tantra, that you're not talking about the new modern sex stuff, because that's like an offshoot. So I would say that's a misconception. And there's more, that the sexual thing is just in the West. And then in India, when people talk about Tantra, people are thinking about like spiritism, black magic. A lot of times in the Indian press, you hear about these tantrics that are casting spells on people, that are causing doing a lot of bad things. And they call them tantrics because to say that is to say this is some kind of black magic type person or spiritist. So there's many misconceptions, and that makes my job very hard.
Of course,
Yeah.
it probably does. But at the same time, it makes it very meaningful and important because you're out there telling people, hey, that you thought Tantra was, well, back up a little bit. It's not that.
I have many friends that teach what I teach, but they don't bother to call it Tantra, even though that's what they're teaching, because of just to get more people in the door, But I wonder how many people come to my channel and they're looking for the sex stuff, and I don't offer that,
Mm-hmm. I think that's very important also because, as you mentioned, this is a very old practice. And like, I personally think that out of respect to is something that we should do, that we should, call things by the name they have. And actually what you mentioned also made me think of other indigenous practices around the world, because even here where I live in Colombia, like there is this let's say probably like the medicine of the indigenous peoples that is based more on plants and different things that you do. And then usually people, they don't go as far as saying that it's black magic, but it's stigmatized too. It's like, that's not real, that's not true, and that's not something you should do, kind of also demonizing it in a different way. So I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And well, what's the story behind you ending up in this path of Tantra?
I was on a bus on my way to a college interview when I was 17. And I was so lucky that I got to sit next to this man who was reading. And we were riding on the bus all night and not saying much. And in the morning, I guess I had some food in my bag. I was taking out some food and I offered him some. And he said, "No, thank you. I can't take food right now. I haven't done my meditation yet. I'm a monk." And I was just blown away. I was like, really? Wow. And so then we had started chatting, and I started telling him about myself and sharing with him stuff I was going to present at the college interview. And he was really nice. And what really touched me the most was that 2 weeks later, he sent me a little box, a gift. He took my address and he invited me to a meditation retreat, but it was all the way out in Missouri. And I didn't know if I was actually going to go. But 2 weeks later, he mailed me a package. And when I opened it, it was a book on meditation, a CD of meditation music, and some pamphlets. And I just thought, like, wow, there's no human who does this, So I was so touched. It was so special. And so then I really made the effort to go to that retreat he invited me to. And on the way to that retreat, I learned tantric meditation.
No,
The people that I traveled with, one of them was also a monk, and he taught me my meditation.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful because it's like so casual, like life just you just cross paths and that's why you're here now and I'm interviewing you about this.
Yeah, right. So when he sent that box to me, that was a personal gift. But if that somehow made it to this to create eventually this podcast, and maybe there's a little bit of info here that can help somebody or touch somebody or somebody can find interesting, then that's that ripple continuing, right? So isn't that beautiful? How to put a little extra effort into something and you don't know just the effect that it will have.
Exactly. I think that's beautiful. Yes.
Mhm.
Good invitation to put extra efforts and things.
Uh-huh.
Well, and then I'd like to know how has Tantra, like, how has it impacted your life? What has it meant in your life? And I think we can divide this in different, aspects, but let's start with as a person, what's the impact that Tantra has had in yourself as the human you are?
Well, I mean, not only has it helped me spiritually so that I can develop my spiritual life, develop my relationship with Brahma, right? With what we call God or supreme consciousness. So not only has it helped in that way, but um, it also has given me so many teachers, so many people that transformed my life, that gave me so much wisdom, passed down so much wisdom. And also, it has given me a moral code, like I was saying, like the yamas and niyamas. Um, because without any of these things, I just don't know how my life would just be hell. you know, Unfortunately, we complicate our lives so much, you know, and
We do.
we a lot of our negative propensities are always being triggered in our society, uh, and so if we don't have something to counter that or to balance that with a lot of positivity in your life that involves spirituality, meditation, spiritual community, a sense of values that you live by, if you don't have that to balance, I my life would be completely out of control, So it's done it's an enormous thing for myself personally. And also it gives me an opportunity to touch people's lives, to help people, to be of service. Because if I wouldn't be doing so much spiritual work, maybe I would have done more music, which I was already doing in the past. So pop music, rock music, salsa music, and maybe that could have made some kind of impact, maybe. But I think a better impact is what I'm doing now, because I think that meditation is something that can transform people from within, you know? So, whereas if you create music, you can still transform people, but maybe from an external side. So, I think that that's another huge plus of what I'm grateful for that this path has brought to me, is it's provided me an opportunity and given me a venue to be of service.
And how about relationships? How has it
Yeah,
impacted your relationships and the way you communicate and talk to other people and relate to them?
it that's where it hasn't done everything. I still have arguments with my mom. That never goes away because
It's like it won't.
what?
It won't. It's part of life.
Right. Especially when you have a mom that doesn't approve of what you do, like in terms of your spiritual life. I was brought up Christian, so my mom would prefer that I was Christian, et cetera, et cetera. So there's so many there's tensions in our life that, one day hopefully will get resolved. And a lot of times those tensions are in our relationships, you know. So it doesn't necessarily cure all, right? But when you follow tantric principles, it means that in your relationship you see the other person as Brahma, as the divine. So as much as possible, you try to remember that this person you're speaking with is Brahma, is an expression of the divine. So you treat them as such. So imagine how that influences you in the way you treat your children. When I see my child, when I see my son, I'm not just taking care of a little boy. I'm taking care of the supreme consciousness in the form of a little boy. Or when I'm talking to my partner in the same way, you see your partner as an expression of the supreme. So on your best days, when you remember these things, it makes a huge difference. And then following the yamas and niyamas, I think that every couple should become familiar with these principles and practice them in the family, practice them in your relationship. So there's a lot that Tantra can do to help one's relationships, a lot, and relationships are so important.
Yeah, they are. And I think what you just said is so important also because um you can look at that in many different ways, right? But you're sharing the perspective from Tantra and how just thinking that, of course, changes the way we relate to people. And then just that simple thought can help us be more respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you think about people just as another human being, that helps you um, be more empathetic, because it's like, okay, these are people, and they have the feelings that I experience, and then you can be empathetic. But certainly having that in mind of like, this is an expression of the supreme consciousness, gives you like, this is a precious life in front of me, and then I should be treating it as such, and caring for it in that way. And I think that that's very nice, because just for example, what's happening right now in the world wouldn't be happening if we all thought of people that way. So that is pretty beautiful.
Yeah, I agree.
And what about work life? I think you started mentioning that a little bit already, with how it maybe shifted you from making music to helping people. But yeah, how did Tantra change or direct or impact your work life?
Well, I teach English, so that's my main job, right? Where I get like a paycheck. So with my students, I talk a lot about there's a beautiful thing called academic freedom. So it means, and when you
Yes.
teach English, you get to the students are supposed to practice writing, right? So then you get to choose what they read to inspire their writing. And so I will infuse a lot of things about the yamas and niyamas. I've done that in the past. Things about meditation. And now actually I'm doing a theme with them on emotional fitness. So, and I have like a meditation club too there. So I think I just can't help it. I have to connect the spiritual work that I do to the work that I do with my students. And luckily, I teach a subject that really can facilitate any kind of topics, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we'll see if what kind of an impact that makes on students.
Probably a lot, but that's cool. And also because teaching requires you to, thanks to that academic freedom, you can just create classes that are also in alignment with you, so that you can enjoy your practice as well. And pretty sure that
Mhm.
doing something you enjoy is going to give back always anyway. So um okay. And did learning about Tantra imply that you had to unlearn maybe concepts, worldviews, ideas that you had before you actually ran into Tantra?
Yeah, what comes to mind is, well, first of all, I think that for me to have opened up to Tantra, first I had to unlearn my religious background. So actually, I did that early on. When I was 14, I became an atheist, thanks to a couple of friends who were atheists, and they influenced me in that way. And that was actually really helpful, really, really good, because what they were rebelling against was all the dogma in religion, all of the illogical beliefs that also are unfair. They put women down. They're based on uh, dogmas and blind beliefs. So that was the initial rejection, right? We don't want religion because religion doesn't seem to make much sense on a philosophical level. It has other important values and properties, like religion teaches about charity, about compassion, helping the poor. So it has really good values, but that intellectual side just never made sense, or at least started to clash with me when I was 14. So that divorced me from my own religious upbringing, so that somehow now I was left with an empty plate. And it didn't take long for me to discover Eastern traditions that I found more interesting, like Taoism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. And so when I learned about that, then I realized, oh, there's more. There's more out there. And I met friends who were Wiccan, who had earth-based traditions that they were doing. And so I found that interesting. And then when the opportunity came to learn meditation, I went with that, and then that led me to Tantra. So I think that's what I had to unlearn, and that was like a pre-unlearning before I would practice Tantra. But then going forward, I have to think about that a little bit more. Certainly Tantra forces you to be a better person. I've been practicing meditation for many years, and for 20 years, been practicing Tantra for 20 years. But that doesn't mean that I was always on, the best person that I could be in different situations. And that could be because maybe I wasn't practicing correctly at the time. Maybe I wasn't following my teacher's uh, recommendations properly. And so, and now I guess I'm jumping off to another topic, but I'll close with this. So basically, your spiritual life is important, but sometimes it's not everything. So although Tantra means a lot and meditation is very important to practice, there are still people that I know who practice meditation and are still making lots of stupid mistakes, you know? And so there is something to be said that one must also be willing to have an intellectual approach, and also, get a lot of mental health training, get therapy if required, become well versed in topics of emotional fitness. You know what I mean? Because if you just sort of say the only thing that there is for me is my spiritual beliefs, but you reduce intellectual curiosity that could potentially allow you to learn other things that make you a better person, and primarily things that have to do with mental health, then you could be missing out, because we're not, if you practice meditation, it's not going to happen overnight that you become one with the supreme consciousness. You're going to be here for a while. You're going to have beautiful meditations, but in the next morning, you're going to be right back in your room, and your mom's going to be yelling at you from the other room all over again. So that's why it's not enough to just, so how I'd like to answer your question is not so, what you have to unlearn is that your spiritual practices are very important, but you have to unlearn an idea that that's all that's required. You also need a lot of intellectual development that can allow you to be not to increase your intellect, to help you analyze things better, to help you with mental health, emotional health.
Make better decisions too.
Right. Be more productive, make better decisions. So I hope that makes sense how I answered. It took me a while to get there.
That's okay. It's the way it's what your process took you through, because what I see here is that that's what the unlearning from the dogma from religion implied, which was I can have my spiritual practice and still, you know, give my brain the tools it needs so that I can be a better human, like, and live my life better, the everyday life with the little tiny things that you have to do every day.
Right.
All right. So I think now we've talked a lot about your experiences and about, general ideas about what Tantra is and certain different things. But I'd like to get a little bit more specific with certain little, maybe everyday life practices, little teachings and things that you can apply in your life. And then to start, I'd like to talk a little tiny bit about relationships and sexuality too. So one thing that is very important for relationships is communication, right? So how do you think that Tantra can help us have better conversations with our partners, with our friends, and with our community, just to, elevate our own personal journey and path?
So the second principle in the yamas is satya. And satya means to use your words in the name of benevolence. So with your partner, you want to speak with them with a lot of care, with a lot of gentleness, because we human beings have the capacity to apply appropriate pressure to anything. If I want to, we can smack or you can caress, right? So as much as possible, you try to be gentle with words. Really, all of those yamas and niyamas, if you practice them with your partners, you're going to transform that relationship. Ahimsa means not hurting. So don't hurt your partner with words, thoughts, or actions. That doesn't mean that you don't have self-defense. So sometimes ahimsa is misinterpreted to mean nonviolence. And nonviolence is also like a dogma. Some people think they have to be nonviolent in all circumstances, but that's not true because you have to also defend yourself. And then there is, so we could actually go through all of those 10 principles and see and just apply those to relationships. If you'd like, we can cover a few more in yama. I talked about asteya earlier, non-stealing. Not depriving people of their due is also considered stealing. So that can translate obviously into relationships. You don't deprive your partner of affection. You don't deprive your partner of understanding, and then there is brahmacharya, which means to see everything as an expression of the divine. So we talked about that earlier, seeing your partner as an expression of the divine. And aparigraha means to live simply. So if you live simply too, you're not so concerned with material accumulation. And that could also help you not treat your partner, as an object. I think our society gives us, makes us feel like people are just as expendable as objects, as material things, but we should have more care, right? When we're dealing with human beings, we should have more care with the expressions of consciousness that are more developed, so that includes human beings, that includes animals. And so if you want a purely tantric perspective, those are some ideas. But I think aside from Tantra, you need to be very well educated in how to develop relationships. Because I think one of the things that we all want is we all want to have good relationships. But one of the things that we least invest in as a people is in education on relationships. So so that needs to change. People should be reading those books to help people have better relationships, going to seminars, going with your partners to educational events. We go on dates to see movies and to have dinner, but go on a date to hear a chat about, how to improve your relationship. Because what you really want is you want that relationship to succeed, right? So I think that's very, very important there. There's also other principles that I can talk about. Uh, um, my guru is named Sri Anandamurti, and he put together these 15 qualities of how to really bring a lot of love into your life, improve your relationships. If you follow these practices, people, they respect you. They see you as somebody who uh, is like a dear sort of. Sorry?
Caring,
Yeah,
maybe.
right. And so just some of those basic uh, principles are like forgiveness. If you make a mistake, acknowledge that you made a mistake and ask what you can do to make up for it. Don't criticize. Um, don't practice. That's super important, in relationships, is not to overly criticize your partner, and to not overly criticize anybody. Those are just a few, that come from the realm of Tantra.
I think that is very important. And I like to highlight that idea of how many things that we see in today's media and society makes us feel that people are like they're at a disposition more than just other human beings with feelings and a lot of other things. And I think personally, I've seen that happen a lot. And for some reason, we also think that we have sex and relationships just figured out, that we don't need to learn about it, that we just know what to do. And we actually usually don't. Precisely because of that, because there is also this lack of education, not only sex education, which has to do with relationships, but also education about how to have relationships. Because in sex is not only the physical act of, intercourse. Sex is a lot more. Sex is the way I communicate with my partner, and that's part of my relationship. And it's part of a relationship with a partner as much as it can be part of a relationship with a friend or anybody else. And I think just this idea, and that's something that I learned, I would say pretty recently, that I found out that we have this view of people in terms of our needs. So it's like I have this person in front of me, but instead of seeing the person that I have in front of me, I rush to see first, how are they going to fulfill needs that I have? And then sometimes we forget, or we don't see that behind the act of maybe fulfilling any need that you have for live somebody, maybe you need someone to listen to you, maybe you need affection, maybe you need, physical touch, whatever it is. This person has to make an effort to give you that, because it's coming from another human being who is deciding to give you this as a gift. So it's not really something that you can just go and say, yeah, that's there, and like I don't have to worry or think about it. So I think it's very important what you just mentioned, because thinking of these things as things we need to educate ourselves all the time about and become better at, because despite what they make us believe, we don't have it figured out. And the way we see portrayed usually in the media, and that, and even the way that our parents sometimes teach us that relationships work, maybe are not the ways, maybe they're not the best ways. They're certainly not the only ways. And maybe they're not the way for us, that the one that's going to make us feel good. So I think that's definitely something that people should take into account, and that might prove very helpful for a lot of people too. Now, talking a little bit more about sexuality, how would you say that Tantra and sex intersect?
I would say that there's three types of sex. There's physical sex, mental sex, and spiritual sex. Physical sex is when you have sexual intercourse with somebody, right? You're engaged in sexual activity with another person physically. Mental sex is when you imagine that you are having sex with another person. So it's all happening in the mind. And as you know, if it happens in the mind, there's a reaction in the body.
Of
So,
course.
um, and then there is spiritual sex. Spiritual sex is now a psycho-spiritual activity. So it's now the idea of, because when you're having physical sex and mental sex, you are connecting with another person, right? So, but when you're having spiritual sex, now you are connecting with the divine, with the supreme consciousness. So you, just like you want to connect with another person and be one, you know, we have also a desire to want to connect with that, that supreme entity and also be one with them. So, I think that spiritual sex, like any type of sex, is really just the desire to be allowed into somebody else's world, right? It's desire to be embraced by another person. And that place of vulnerability is actually the most intimate thing that we can have happen to us. So it's a craving that we have. It's something we all long to experience. And that same idea gets applied now to your relationship with the divine, that you also want to enter the divine, be embraced by the divine, be one with the divine. And so that's to me what spiritual sex is. And that's to me um, how Tantra intersects. Now, you could also be having physical sex with somebody and apply tantric principles where you're making love with your partner, but you feel in that moment that you're actually making love with the supreme consciousness. So when you kiss them, you feel like you're kissing the supreme consciousness. When you're holding them, you feel like you're holding the supreme consciousness. That type of ideation can really make your sexual experience or any activity tantric, because another word for tantric is just spiritual.
Right. And you've mentioned that the goal in Tantra is precisely to do that, to join the supreme consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think celibacy is also a very kind of big thing when it comes to Tantra. There are a lot of people who talk about this, maybe even, people who tend to be either a coach or, something down this road. And they talk about celibacy. Some recommend it. Some even talk about it as a key practice for men in Tantra specifically. But what are your thoughts on it?
I think celibacy can work if you are a monk or a nun. I think that there's a place for that in life, in society. That's a choice that people can make, because some people just, they don't want a family life. They want to dedicate their whole life to their spiritual practices, and they want the world to be their family. They want to serve the world as their family. So celibacy exists in that aspect. But I think if we choose to be family people, then we have to now negotiate our sexual lives, because celibacy is not going to be practical. We have an innate propensity to procreate, right? That's part of our animal dharma. We have a human
Mhm.
dharma and an animal dharma. And as the animal side of us needs to procreate, needs food, so et cetera, et cetera. And so then needs sex. So then we have to negotiate how much of that do we need, you know? And that's also something that should be balanced, just like everything else should be balanced. How much we sleep should be balanced. What we eat should have a conscientious approach, So so celibacy, I think, obviously works for people who want to live a monastic life. And if somebody wants to choose to live a sexually abstinent life until they get married or something, I think that's also fine, right? That's a personal choice. And um, there's, naturally, because our animal dharma is so prevalent in us, a lot of our attention goes to, what am I going to eat today? Right? What am I going to eat today? What you think about? I know we think about that at least 3 times a day.
Yep.
So what am I going to eat today? Or um, well, we also need shelter. Where am I going to live? So I have to make money to pay my rent. And so a lot of our mental energy actually gets focused on that side of us. What am I going to eat? Where am I going to live? And then, of course, that includes sex, because that's part of our animal dharma. So we can spend a lot of time thinking about sex. And the trouble is that all of that mental energy is just taking us toward just a very minute part of ourselves. I mean, no, it's a big part, but the part of ourselves that actually we're evolving not away from, but that our evolution is now in another direction. As human beings now, we don't we know we're not just going to be happy if we have a plate of food in front of us every day and if we have someone to have sex with. We
That's
want
true.
something much greater now. We want success. We want esteem. We want to invent things. We want to write things. We want to do art and get involved in aesthetics and have an aesthetically rich life. So those are now away from the animal dharma. Those are now the things that make us human. So you see, we really need to negotiate our sexual lives and have a plan for that, or else we'll spend a lot of mental energy there and never really get anywhere in life. And yes, and so then that negotiation for our sexual lives has to be satisfying, right? I'm not saying suppress your sexual side or just do the basics for no, it's you have to do enough in that area that's going to satisfy you. But once you've got that down, now you start focusing on the other things in life, to develop your intellect, to develop your intuition, to develop your spirituality. So, you cannot do those things without taking care of the basics, the food, the shelter, the clothing, the sex. That has to be there, yes. But we tend to spend a lot of time there. So it's something that is, we were just talking about relationships. And one of the things that's going to improve your relationships, since with your partner you have sex, is that sex doesn't become a point of tension in your relationship. So it's wise to talk with your partner and say, how often do you want to have sex? This is how often I want to have sex. So and so then you minimize tension, you increase communication, and then you can do bigger and better things with your partner. And I hope that when I'm saying that, people aren't thinking that it sounds like I'm trying to suppress or downplay sex, because no, you have to make it satisfying for you. That, of course, that's very, very important.
And I think what you've mentioned is really important, because there is a lot of, I don't know if you've seen that around, people talk about things like mismatched libidos, for example, and how maybe one partner wants to have more sex than the other and things like that. And maybe sometimes it's just that they didn't talk about it. And then maybe it's just the timing. Maybe you come to me in a moment where I don't feel like doing that because I am focused on something else, or because, I don't have the energy to invest in that specific activity right now. Mm-hmm. And I think the advice that you've just given about, talking about it and, hey, how often do you want to have sex is very important. And it can change the way we see many things, because it's also one of those things that we think we know that nobody teaches us to talk about, and that we understand as I have to get it without words, right? So it's like I should know.
Yeah. And that is because we have a very immature sense of relationships to begin with. We tend to think that you see, how like young ladies are socialized, girls are socialized to have like a Prince Charming, right?
Yep.
And so there's this fantasy that's put into girls' minds for that. But actually, but similar to that, I think all human beings are also socialized to have one fantasy when it comes to relationships, and that is the idea of a soulmate.
Yeah.
So the soulmate to me is no different than the Prince Charming, because the Prince Charming doesn't exist, and the soulmate to me also doesn't exist, because who is the soulmate? The soulmate is that one amazing person that is going to sweep you off your feet, that once you find that person, you're going to be in the honeymoon phase for the rest of your life, right? It's that one person that you don't even have to say something, they already know. They can read your mind. They're you have you're going to have like all the best fun with them, and you're going to have the best sex with them too, because your soulmate isn't your soulmate if they don't completely satisfy you sexually as well. So now love and sex becomes intertwined, which of course it does in our modern romantic culture. But so you see, but that soulmate doesn't exist because there isn't going to be anybody that's going to check off all those boxes.
Exactly.
Everybody has many defects. They have their own flaws, and so it's your partner's job to help you with flaws, to understand you regarding your flaws. And so I think that, like you said, the mismatched libidos. You came into the relationship thinking this person was your soulmate. Well, how could you be my soulmate if we have mismatched libidos? So there's now an incongruency. So then you must not be the one for me. But really, it's just bullshit. There is,
Yeah.
there is no soulmate like we think there is. There's just two human beings, two minds that have to come together and try to understand one another. And that's very difficult because even one mind can barely understand itself. So that's why you have to talk. Like you said, if you have a mismatched libido, increase the communication. Say, what do you need? What can I do for you? This is what I need. This is what I need you to do for me. And then you arrive at a conclusion. That's the real relationship. Those are the real soulmates, the ones who talk, and come to understanding.
You need a t-shirt that says that.
Yeah,
Those are the real soulmates, the ones who talk. Period.
Right.
That's true. That's true. And I think to go back to something that you mentioned earlier, that I also thought it was just so insightful and beautiful. And I'm saying that word a lot. I need a dictionary now. Is you said that we have this desire to be allowed into other people's worlds, and that translates to sex as well, as much as it does to relationships. And I think I like to think of it because when you learn languages, you also learn how languages are so intertwined with culture and how you can never separate that, right? And then I like to think of people like if they were each of them a different country or a different, just a different language. So like they even, and it happens even though they live in the same city, they have different worldviews, different words they use for different things, because even that happens. Like the word that I would use to describe an emotion might be different for you. And then when you talk to me and you tell me your word, I understand it as I would use it. And then it's different. Mm-hmm. So I think that is also very important. And it also relates to this idea of people being just there for you. And then like you just take in what you need, because of course, like nobody's gonna check that all those boxes. And in reality, you like, what is it that you actually want? Do you want to connect with another human being and understand them, and enter their world and see everything they have going on in there, which is gonna include not some things that are not gonna be so pretty, that are not gonna be what you imagined, what you wanted, but are still gonna be part of who they are,
Mm-hmm.
because that's true. So I think that's
Yeah.
just it, as you can see, is probably everybody can piece together this little thing only of saying talk to each other about what you want in bed, about how often you want to have sex, just really extrapolates to a lot of other aspects of their relationships, of relationships in general, and how we view them.
Mm-hmm.
um and I think it's also what you said about, hey, just talk and ask, what do you need? It's also being empathetic, and like, instead of first coming from a place of self and selflessness, where, sorry, of selfishness, where you see like, I am not getting sex, and then I need, something is wrong, and maybe that what's wrong is you, and then maybe you're not the one. Maybe you can just change the
Mm-hmm.
narrative for what's going on with you. Is there something going on? Are you okay? What do you need? um and I
Yeah.
think that, and it also goes back to what you mentioned about seeing other human beings as this expression of the supreme consciousness, because I believe, or the way it's resonating with me, is that uh if they are an expression of that, what's going on with them is also something beautiful that is worth digging into and talking about, instead of just, going the easy way
Mm-hmm.
out and saying you're not the one, next. Right?
Yeah. Exactly. Learn your partner's sex bio, right?
Pretty much, or write it together.
Write it together. You would know more about this than me.
Yeah, but I just thought that, yeah, every time you talk about communication and every time you talk about relationships, there is just a lot of ways you can, that all is not that you can, there are a lot of ways in which those things just intersect and help one another, because if you are
Mm-hmm.
not communicating well with your partner, then sex probably is not going to happen well. And it just goes back and forth, and maybe if sex is not okay, maybe that affects your communication. It's just, everything is connected when it comes to, when it comes to people, really.
And sometimes people, they need someone to help them process, right? So they may not even know how to articulate. You may be asking your partner, "What's wrong? Well, why isn't this working? Why you?" But it's quite possible that your partner can't even articulate why they feel the way they do. And so there's something there that they still have to process. And so if you become aware of that, then you have to be a little patient, and you have to encourage that first to gain clarity, because the person has to have clarity within themselves first before they can be clear with you. Um, and then there's so many things we're socialized around sex, right? Like, um, so many people say, "Oh, the more sex you have, the better the relationship. If you're not having sex, you're lame. You have a bad relationship." And these are all just like
It's just society.
yeah, exactly. It's the chatter, right? It's the chatter going on that doesn't necessarily have to. You don't have to believe that. You don't have to get it's like the many thoughts in your mind. You have countless thoughts in your mind. Doesn't mean you have to believe them, all of them, because there's
That would
so
be
many.
crazy.
Exactly, so many ridiculous thoughts that come into the mind all the time. Imagine if you believed each one of them, right, or followed through on each one of them.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a good moment to make an invitation to the audience to just, in all aspects of your life, just build what you need. I think this is something that is coming up right now in the conversation, depending on, like, what type of relationship do you want, versus what type of relationship have you been told that you should have.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
same goes for your spirituality, because that was your journey. For example, you were told probably in a way, to have a certain spirituality, but then sometime later you realize that what you needed was different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always good to like keep an open mind when you hear that chatter, as Gustavo calls it. And I think this is a good moment to, since you are an emotional fitness coach, to talk about emotional fitness. So I think it's cool to start because there are also many ways to coach, right? So what's your approach to it? What's your approach to coaching?
My approach to coaching is, good question.
I guess it's
Well,
from
because
Tantra, right? But
no, I mean, the reason why I said that is because it's not so much what is my approach, it's what are people coming with,
okay.
right? So, and then based on that, to respond to that, based on that, to be of service to that, and as people say, create space for that. And so we all know that we're emotional beings, right? We have a huge range of emotions, and many of those emotions terrify us. You know, we don't know how to deal with them. It's such a shame, right? It's such a gosh, like talk about being flawed as you know, talk as a species, right? Every religion has said, like Christianity says, human beings have original sin. Buddhism says every human being has an ego, and you know, and that spreads to other Eastern traditions. And Hinduism talked about this concept of Maya, like an illusion, the illusions of the world, the illusions in oneself. So we certainly are not perfect in any way, and usually we realize our imperfections through our emotions, because we we punish ourselves with our own emotions. You know, when we make mistakes, we go into a state of depression, anger, um, and so we need somebody to help us sometimes, if necessary, to teach us how to process emotions, to teach us how to have a better relationship with our emotions. And because what we're usually doing is just suppressing them, we're trying to ignore them, and then we fall back into patterns, into negative patterns. So an emotional fitness coach should help you to have tools and strategies for how to deal with difficult emotions, and also provide you with new perspectives. So, for example, a better perspective on what it means to be successful, what it means to have a good relationship, what it means to be happy, a perspective on how to view oneself, um, and so emotional fitness is also about that a wave of self improvement. You know, to always be trying to improve oneself, and and releasing the mental bondages that we have in the mind, you know, meaning um, selfishness, like um, I'm thinking now of success, you know, how we have this idea of success that if I'm not successful, then I'm a loser, you know. And so when we fall back into that, that's a mental bondage that we create, you know. So we have to learn to break free from those things, um, and also open up to spirituality. So I would say that that's kind of sums up my approach, is learning how to deal with our negative emotions, but then also changing our perspective on life, because so much of what we've been taught is what's creating our negative emotions, you know.
So is that what it means to arrive at your highest self?
To arrive at your highest self. I would say to arrive at your highest self means um, to arrive at your Buddha self,
Okay.
right? That's a transcendent state. Um, you know, Abraham Maslow, right? The American psychologist who created who created the theory of motivation. And so he talked about these needs, different layers of needs that human beings have, starting from physiological needs all the way up to a need for self-actualization, which means to fulfill your true potential in life. Like all of us, at a certain point, we want to fulfill our highest potential in whatever activity that we're engaged in whatever way we would like. But before he died, he expanded that pyramid, and the highest layer became to arrive at a transcendent state. So that goes beyond uh, our full potential in any sort of um, earthly sense. You know, it actually means to uh, to evolve, to go from being a human being to say becoming like a God. You know, so we're on that evolution. We've evolved from being an animal to becoming now a human being, being fully human. And now the evolution for a human being is now to become, you know, as divine as possible.
And what have you found to be people's biggest obstacles in achieving that, or in just in being who they want to be and achieving the success they want?
I think part of the big obstacles are just, you know, how they view success, how they view relationships, how they view what happiness is. If you have the wrong perspective on those things, you're setting yourself up, right? You're setting yourself up for disappointment. So I think those are big obstacles. Basically, like what you keep asking, you know, the things that you have to unlearn. If you don't unlearn them, then you're going to fall into traps.
Okay. And
Mhm.
what are exercises that we can do to actually not fall probably into those negative patterns that we maybe tend to have, which one of them could be these narratives about success and things like that? Are there exercises that we can do to actually, redirect these things in a different way, think of them in a different way, so that we can break free from those patterns?
Yes, I think that we should have emotional first aid tools, right? That teaches us how to process negative emotions, so that when you do feel a negative emotion like anger, like jealousy, like worry, you can identify that emotion, and then you can sort of create space between you and the emotion, and ask yourself, you know, why am I feeling this? Like, like talk to it, like, oh, hello, worry. You know, thank you for visiting me today. Hello, anger. I see you're stopping by today. What is it that you would like to teach me? You know, what is the message that you're bringing me today? And so then you can let that emotion serve a purpose. You can let the anger breathe. You can let it exist. You can let it be. And then you can let it uh, teach you something, so that then you have some insight. So that's important to do as a way of self training and coping to arrive at that place where you can do that. And then I think it's like I before I was talking about external problems, environmental problems. I said, like, because you asked me what are some big obstacles people have. Well, the environment for sure. Like I said, how you view success, relationships, happiness, etc. But then there's also the inner world where there's obstacles. So within our own minds, our negative emotions are triggered even when nothing is happening bad on the outside. I mean, sometimes, you know, people like they find somebody that they love and they fall in love with, right? And then something common that I hear people say is, oh God, everything's going so great that I'm almost like afraid that something bad is going to happen. Right? Like, oh, this is so perfect that it almost feels so good to be true. And I know, and I'm scared now because I know that something bad is going to happen. So
I plead
that,
guilty.
so that is coming from inside. That's coming from the mind. So we have also internal adversity. And that could be because we have some past traumas that have taught us that everything has a price, or when we did feel joy with our family members, that quickly turned to anger or disappointment. And so we begin to associate now joy, love with that, with the negative thing that comes up. So we have to learn to deal with in Tantra, we call that samskaras, those impressions in the mind that pop up when we least expect them. And we need also strategies to deal with our samskaras. So we need emotional fitness to deal with the environmental problems that we have on a day-to-day basis, and the internal impressions that have created tension in our minds that's still not resolved.
So I'm guessing that illnesses like stress and anxiety are also thought of in that way from the Tantra perspective.
Stress and anxiety, those are just, emotions, and especially anxiety, And in Tantra, there is a word called briti. Briti means emotions. Some tantrics say it means emotions, but some, like Patanjali, says it means mental modifications. So the mind is full of mental modifications. To me, that just means the mind is full of emotion.
Okay.
These modifications, they bind us. Right now, I'm happy. I'm happy right now. But if somebody's talking to my partner and I start to get jealous, now I'm no longer happy, right? Now my mind has now like become small, and I'm fixated on this emotion of jealousy. So it's a modification to the mind, whereas the mind wants to actually expand and be free. It wants to be free of any tension, So it's going to agitate the heck out of you until you resolve it.
Yeah.
Resolve the tensions and the negative emotions that are popping up. So you need to understand what's happening,
Of course. Yeah, I think that's very important. I like how you say that the mind wants to expand, because it's I could say that personally, finding a place where I can feel peaceful within myself has been challenging always. And it resonates with me when you say that the mind wants to expand, because in a way, what I hear is the mind wants to be at peace, and probably in the best condition it can be to take whatever comes. So I like that. And I like how, okay, if you don't really process these emotions, or if you don't give yourself time to talk with them, maybe it's not going to be helpful. Maybe just give it time and acknowledge that desire that you have, because I think that's something else that we struggle with. We do have this desire of being at peace, or as you said, the mind wants to expand. We want to be at peace. We want to be okay. We want to be fine. But we give more weight to these other feelings, the negative feelings. So, and we stay there for probably longer than we need to stay in. As opposed to just seeing it as something that is coming to visit me and I can chat with it and see what it has to teach me. And that's also an approach that allows your mind to stay in control in a way, because yes, you're having this emotion, but you're helping yourself out. And I think that's pretty helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing is sometimes, because for example, what I just explained to you, for me, it took a lot of time to understand and see that this is what I was doing, what was happening. um, how can we maybe more easily identify these negative emotional patterns that we get into that affect our mental wellness?
Well, I think we have to maybe go through the emotions, have some sort of like human emome. You know how there's the human genome where the scientists have identified all of the genes that human beings have. We can I try to identify all of the emotions, and I think actually as culture changes, so do emotions. You know, um, for example, uh, when we think today of nostalgia, nostalgia usually means nowadays when you're kind of romanticizing a time in the past or thinking about a certain time in your life, right? Oh, this reminds me when I was a child, right? Oh, this city reminds me of when I went to camp, or when I went to vacations with my family in these small towns. But the original word nostalgia, for example, when it first was developed by doctors in Europe, nostalgia was a syndrome for people that missed their house. So then and that's it, you know. So people could get diagnosed with nostalgia, and the cure was you need to go home. You need to go back to your house. But over time, that emotion expanded. It's not just um, uh, the idea of missing your home. It could be the idea of missing a time in your life, a particular moment, or a particular activity you used to do. So it's expanded. So our emotions are expanding throughout time, and different cultures even have different perspectives on certain emotions. And but it would be helpful. A good place to begin is to just take time to go through as many emotions as possible so that you can learn to name them when they come up. And one thing that's beautiful about Tantra is that the chakras in Tantra, they have petals, right? So the first chakra has 4 petals, the second chakra has 6 petals, the third chakra has 10 petals. So they all have different numbers of petals. And each of those petals is ascribed a vritti, which is an emotion. So, for example, one of the petals in the third chakra, which is where the navel is, where the belly button is shame, you know. And another one there is basically anger, peevishness. And so you see, another one there is jealousy. So sometimes human beings claim that, they say when they get angry, they feel it in their stomach. I know I do. When I'm angry, my stomach twitches, I notice that. And, uh, and maybe when people feel ashamed, like they want to throw up, they want to vomit, because that's a digestion thing, and that's where the third chakra is. It's in that part of the body. So Tantra has if you learn all of the vrittis, what each of those petals represents, then right there is a good framework for you to name all of the emotions. Oh, here I have emotion, jealousy, this, that, you know. So I think that's a good start, because once you can name the emotions, then you can identify them as they pop up in the mind, and then learn to see all of them as your friends. You know, the emotions are no different than our organs. You know, we wouldn't, if right now I'm hungry, but I don't feel like eating because I want to do something else. I'm not going to rip out my stomach and say, I don't need you because I want to do this right now. We would never do that, because we
That's
know
true.
that the stomach has a function, right? Even though in this moment it's acting as like kind of like my little enemy, but it actually has a deeper function. So does all of our emotions. Anger has a deeper function. Fear has a deeper function. The ugliest emotions, even sadism, cruelty, they have their place in a particular context. So we never want to suppress them or hate them. We want to get to know them, and let them do their job, which is basically to teach us something, to point something out, to remind us of something. you know?
Yeah. Much like pain.
Mhm.
Like that's the parallel you're making. Pain in your body usually means, hey, there is something wrong. Pay attention to me. So
Right.
emotions are the same for how we feel, for emotional fitness. So like the
Mhm.
emotion is there as a symptom to tell you, hey, you need to pay attention to something that you haven't been paying attention to, maybe. And
Right.
I think that's very important, and it resonates a lot because I personally feel nobody has told me, but the way I name it is anxiety. And I think over time I've learned to just save for myself a lot of things. I didn't used to do this. I used to like just handle things as they came, but then at some point, like I just had to, because there was this pressure to get so many things done. So I kind of had to learn to do that. And then in turn, this other emotion started to become more present, this anxiety sometimes. And usually it feels like it comes out of nowhere. And I think I like what you're saying, because sometimes you feel that it comes out of nowhere.
Mhm.
And when you spend time with it, you realize that maybe it actually didn't come out of nowhere. It was actually, as you said, pointing out that something else was wrong, that there was something you were not feeling okay with, that you were just not paying attention to. I
Right.
think that is so important. And I think for it's also worth trying to talk about how can we integrate this emotional fitness with in partnership, right? Or like maybe what are some questions that we can ask ourselves or potential partners to better understand and improve our emotional intelligence in partnership specifically.
Well, another question that I think is helpful to ask a partner is, what are your what are your flaws? What are your challenges? You know, listen, you and I, we're both imperfect. Okay, so you know that you should you if you don't know that going in, this is a fact. Okay, I'm imperfect. I have many flaws. I have many problems. I have many traumas. I have lots of stuff I'm dealing with. This is who I am. And you are no different. I know that. So why don't you share with me in what are the tensions in your life that either you've resolved or are still unresolved? And I'll share with you what are the tensions in my life. What are the marks that life has left on you? And I will show you, I will reveal the marks that life has left on me. And once we can see each other like that, then you can make a choice. You've been through a little too much for me. I, you know, I don't know if I can handle your tensions, your imperfections. You like to drink and drive, for example. I don't know if that's something that I can handle, right? Or you have a problem with commitment. Okay, that I need someone who can handle commitment. So not only do you get informed, what are the other person's challenges and difficulties, uh, and you should believe people, because we tend not to.
Yes.
Maya Angelou said that, believe people the first time they show you who they are, right? And also believe people when they tell you verbally issues that they have. So you going into a relationship, you should choose what you can handle. And if you can't handle something, you should very, amicably say, thank you very much. It was nice meeting you. But I have to go, right? So that's important. And then if you choose to stay in the relationship, it means then that you choose to accept this person's emotional imperfections. And as their partner, it becomes your job to treat them the same way you would a child. A child is going to throw tantrums. A child needs attention, needs food, needs care. A child needs physical touch. I'm a parent. I have a son. My son is 2 years old. not a day. I can't imagine a day where I don't hug him. I don't kiss him. I don't hold him. We don't touch each other's cheeks. I cannot imagine a day like that. And my son and everybody was like, you were like that. I was like that. Everybody was once a baby like that. So that means that everybody needed that. Everybody. What makes us think that we don't need that today? We
That's
need
true.
we need exactly the same things. Really, not much different. That means every day. Now, of course, yes, you get older. You shouldn't expect that also, because now, you have to also deal with the reality that you're no longer an adorable baby anymore. Now
Yeah.
you're a
People don't want to
grown
hug you all the
man.
time anymore.
Right. You're a grown man who's aging and blah, blah, blah. So people are not going to run up to you and like they would if you were a little baby. But the principles remain the same. That grown man or grown woman still needs all of that attention and affection. So if you're going to partner up with somebody, and you're means you're willing to take on their flaws, their craziness, all of their problems become your problems. That's what it means to be married. You become one with that person while still maintaining your identities. But if they have a problem, that's going to be your problem. If they're in debt, that's going to turn into your debt if you're married and you share your finances. If they have a crazy mother, she's going to be your crazy mother too, because she's now your crazy mother-in-law. So you want to be very cautious with who you join a relationship with. And then once you do, you have to be skilled at nurturing that person and skilled at helping them also with their emotional imbalances. I mean, and if you're not skilled, I recommend that you educate yourself and you try and because we all play a role for our partners. We're their friend, we're their teacher, we're their cheerleader, we're their parent, we're their best friend. We should never be their enemy, their critic, their worst critic. We should never be like their like a business partner. You're not putting in your share. Fuck that. Like, of course, things have to be fair, but it's more your relationship with your partner it's going to get complicated. So you need to choose wisely and you need to step up to the plate to
Yeah, and
be a
I
good
think
partner.
yeah, and I think that's important too as a responsibility with the other person too, because it's as you said, it's gonna happen, in partnership when you in any moment, I would say in partnership, but I think you realize that as the longer you are with a person, the clearer it becomes that you are all those things for that other person.
Mm-hmm.
And then like if you have a glimpse into what things can be in the future, can you really show up for it? And if not, as you mentioned, are you able to educate yourself, and would you be willing to, so that you can show up for it, because it will be required and it will be needed, because
Mm-hmm.
this other person will need that, right? And I think it's also a responsible decision that you can make when you say, you know what, maybe I cannot really support you in the way that you would need, and then that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
because not everybody is really gonna be able to be together. That's fine. But as you also
Mm-hmm.
have mentioned, every single relationship requires work. Like, you build them, you don't just find it somewhere. So
Yeah.
that's also
Yeah.
really important.
And you're going to take on that person's troubles. Don't think it's not going to rub off. It totally will, especially if
Yeah.
you marry them. If you marry them, even more. And in if you date them for a month, some things will rub off. You date them for a year, a lot of things will. You date them if you marry them, and even more. So don't think that you are immune. You will lose some of your identity. So some of your own self. But that it's fair to also say that if you can't handle it, it's also okay, because none of us are perfect. And so encourage your partner to get healing, to find coaches, to get therapy. Just do your best just do your best.
Yeah, I think yep. Do your best. Okay. And then I think all of these things about emotions and the mind require a lot of discipline. What is your advice for creating mental discipline?
Maybe it depends on what you need the discipline for, right? So if you want to learn meditation, you can consult with your teacher for them to give you tips for how to help with your meditation practice. For whatever you want, I think it depends on what you want to accomplish. Then you know what sort of discipline you need.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I think we all need a level of discipline where we have a sense of self-restraint. So if you're a writer, right, you're going to have to come to terms with the fact that sometimes you have to tell your family, sorry, I can't come to this party because I have to finish my writing, you know. So you need a level of self-restraint. You have to learn how to say no so that you can prioritize what you want to accomplish. So I think that's an important discipline to develop, is learning how to say no, learning how to stop yourself when you're getting off track with something so you can get back on track.
That's good. Yeah, I think I need a lot of that. Okay. All right. And I think part of that discipline also comes with routines, with daily routines. I don't know if if you have any advice for people on daily habits that they can practice to have a stronger mental focus.
Practice meditation. Practice meditation, because meditation will do a few things. It will give you concentration exercises. Most meditations require you to focus on one thing, whether it's a mantra or the present moment. So meditation will train your mind to concentrate more. It will also vibrate your mind in a positive way. It'll purify your mind, you know. So it will, if you do a spiritual meditation like tantric meditation, it will give you a daily ritual and opportunity to connect with the divine, your divine father or mother in the universe, and run to that divine father or mother's arms in your meditation and be one and feel love and feel sheltered. So definitely, oh, and don't take my word for it. You know, there's science now has validated that.
There's
countless scientific studies that have proven how good meditation is for you. So I invite you to contact me to learn meditation. But right now, I want to invite you to check out this video that you see on your screen right now. The video should have popped up. It's called What is Spiritual Sex? And I'd like for you to check it out, because in this video, we'll go into a little more detail with how to differentiate one's perspectives on physical sex, mental sex, and spiritual sex, and help you to develop your spiritual sex life. So go ahead and check it out. I'll see you there.
All right, Gustavo. Thank you so much for sharing all the wisdom that you've gathered in your life with us today. Well, everybody, if you'd like to learn meditation from Gustavo for free, you can contact him on his website at tantrathoughts.com, or you can write to him on his email at tantrathoughts@gmail.com. You can also head over to his YouTube channel, which is also called Tantra Thoughts. Thank you so much for being here, Gustavo.
Thank you, Diana. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. You're doing a wonderful service to your community, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. See you all next time with another Sex Talks with Diana. Sex Talks with Diana is produced by MySexpire, an educational platform meant to empower people like you to take command of your sexual story. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, and Spotify at MySexpire. Visit our website and join our e-letter at mysexpire.org and support our work by joining our Patreon. If you enjoyed this talk, please share it with a friend to continue the conversation. See you next time!